Hey everyone, we're going to talk today about the freedom of speech. There's certainly been a lot of debate about what should be allowed on college campuses, um, what Donald Trump should be allowed to tweet, and so, and of course, what exactly is fake news. So, yeah, certainly a lot of uh, political interests competing to, I guess, prevail. A lot of power plays, politics, political correctness. We're going to discuss all those things, but starting with euphemisms. All right, so what are euphemisms? Well, euphemisms typically refer to polite, indirect expressions that replace words or phrases considered harsh or impolite. So we might say someone kicked the bucket instead of they died. But there's euphemisms that I guess are commonly understood, even though they have different meanings of what they really do mean. There's another kind of euphemism that's actually used to hide the real meaning. And so, as you can see, Homer disappearing into the bushes, so that the bushes represent the euphemism that hides who he really is or what his real agenda is. Um, so, what are some of these euphemisms? We see climate change. We all agree that climate changes. What's the real meaning? There's an imminent apocalypse about to happen. Earth's going to explode. That's pretty much what it translates to. Um, it's universally understood to mean global warming, not global cooling. And it's usually universally understood to imply it's going to happen in a couple of years or a decade. Um, Even if some people may mean for it to mean centuries or thousands of years, which is a more realistic timescale for climate change, no one ever says it. And I think in part we don't say it, or people don't say it simply because they don't want to focus on it. They really do want the implication of an imminent apocalypse. Equality, we all think of individual equality, but its real meaning is gay privileges, and this was very prevalent during several campaigns on social media, trying to get the population to support gay marriage, which they never did. Yeah, at least to say it was never passed legislatively. It was only pushed through by the Supreme Court. But yeah, definitely a different meaning than what we all agree on. Pro-choice has the implication that we're going for individual choice here. So we all agree about liberty. The real meaning, though, is legal baby killing, the choice to kill babies. Not a universal agreement for sure. So, and I guess the list goes down. I like going through these just because I think it's useful for us to understand what we're really talking about. The war on women, we all agree that we love women. But the real meaning about the war on women is that there is an effort to protect babies, right? Now, they might not, those who might have us think about the war on women wouldn't necessarily think about it as being protecting babies. They would like to focus on what they would think is the harsh or negative aspect of controlling women, or doing some undue harm to women as a war on women. So what the real meaning is, again, we don't talk about that. This is all about protecting babies, or all about feeling like women are being harmed in some way. We're just talking about, when it comes to, hey, do you like women or not? Everyone agrees on that. So diversity, we all like individual differences, but the real meaning of diversity is being anti-white, straight, Christian. Did we say male? Definitely male. So anti all those things, not just anti-white, but anti-straight, anti-Christian, anti-male. That's diversity. And in fact, if you focus on white, straight, Christian, male, that would be considered inappropriate, is the nice way they put it. But those who would advocate diversity do not want you to be talking about those things. They want you to focus on the other things, right? The minorities. Which isn't to say we don't appreciate minorities. We all appreciate individual differences and minorities, but not the way that people would focus on diversity. giving special privileges to those who aren't white, straight Christian males. Multiculturalism is somewhat similar. We all appreciate different cultures. I think everyone does. But the real meaning is non-integration, which is to say multiple cultures living side by side in isolation. Culture wars. So, maybe Chinese immigrate to Canada and they form their own Chinese community and they retain their culture. They don't learn English or French or whatever their local languages are. They don't learn the cultures and assimilate into the cultures. They are separate, non-integration. And so if you pull out what it really is of non-integration and culture wars, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily agree anymore. It's not that the definition changed on multiculturalism, it's just that we're allowing a more complete understanding of what it really means instead of what it just sounds like. Do a few more of these, and then we'll go to what euphemisms really are, or I should say the appropriate use of euphemisms. Equal opportunity, everybody loves opportunity equal for every individual, but what they really mean when they say equal opportunity is equal outcome. And that's exemplified because certain minorities are given preference over everyone else, and that's to advocate an equal outcome. So it doesn't even mean, it means the opposite almost of what it says. Progressivism implies progress, we like progress, but it really means the destruction of tradition, and especially religion. Black Lives Matter, we all love black lives, we love all lives. That's universally agreed. Whatever, left, right, center, wherever you come from, we all value lives and black lives too. But it really means anti-police and black superiority. And if you look at the movement, whites have been pushed to the back of their rallies because it's pretty obvious blacks are superior in their agenda. And of course, everyone else has to take a secondary role. So all of these really are a war for minorities to have advantage over everyone else, all depending on which minority you're focusing on here. So euphemisms, they sound like they mean one thing, and we all agree on that, but they don't. And just going back to the first one on climate change, and I'm a physicist, but I'm also fairly well versed on climate and climate change and what happens with the heat balance of the earth and all of that. And I would have to say I strongly disagree with the idea that CO2 is bad for the environment or the earth in any way. Okay, but that's what climate change has been represented to mean. But if someone said, do you deny climate change? I would say absolutely not. Climate always changes. It's constantly changing, always warming, always cooling, depending on what cycle is going on. And what's more, we can't change it. It's forces way beyond our power, even way beyond CO2, way beyond our industrialization. It's really, really big stuff. We're just not that powerful. You'd have to have a God complex to believe. Anyhow, that's going into something else. So let's continue on with what euphemisms really are about. Is it politeness or is it deception? So traditional euphemisms are kick in the bucket, bit the dust, bit the big one, bought the farm, croaked, passed away. These all mean die. And why do we say all these other things? It's not to deceive anyone about what we're talking about. If I said so-and-so kicked the bucket, there is, to no degree, any kind of ambiguity over whether or not the person actually died. It's crystal clear. But we say these kinds of things because we don't like saying death. It's really harsh. It's really direct. And death is one of those words that has a very, very huge stigma. So it's considered being polite because we're not actually calling something out in a very harsh way. A lot of other things that have very strong emotions have to do with immorality, including prostitution. So you have things like turn a trick, escort, birds and the bees, going all the way, sleeping together. Clearly, if you're talking about two people sleeping together, you're not really talking about that they are sleeping in the same bed. You're really talking about an act they did together. So why do we have to be so, let's say, non-direct about this? And the reason is because people are very sensitive about these very strong issues. It's not that if I said they were sleeping together, it's not that anyone was confused that, hey, maybe they were talking they were sleeping in the same bed. And that's it. Everybody knows what it means, crystal clear. So there's no deception. It's just that it's easier for us to talk about these things. Okay, so I hope I've kind of delineated between euphemisms of politeness and euphemisms of clear deception. So global warming really, I would say, is more direct because that's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about warming on a global scale. And it's pretty clear what that means. Climate change, not so clear. Not so clear at all. Well, I think people do understand that in general, predominantly you're talking about the Earth is warming on a grandiose scale, but the words itself have been deliberately changed to hide that. I suppose if climate change were used hand in hand with global warming, so that global cooling, which was actually a thing a few decades ago, wasn't considered a thing or wasn't part of climate change, then there would be a little bit of merit for that. But yeah, trying to deceive is definitely not conducive to the truth. So we'll get to the truth and deception and freedom of speech and what that all means in just a second. So, all right, so we got quite a few other euphemisms. Again, people say polite expression. I think what we mean to say by that is simply like the ideas that are so gross that to say it directly is, I guess, puts the image really strong in people's mind. If you're, let's say, at the dinner table, there are certain things you just directly do not say because people are eating and they don't want to literally think about it. They just want to kind of get maybe you might want them to get the gist of what's going on without thinking too literally and closely to it. But anyhow, those are euphemisms. So let's look at the freedom of speech. So the idea of the freedom of speech is simply that people can express ideas. Now, expressing lies and deception really is in the military world the equivalent of using force, because you're making people think about things not only that they don't want, but also in a way that they don't want to think about it. So for instance, if I told you that there's a fire in the building, I'm essentially forcing you to run out of that building if you believe that lie. Okay, let's say it's a lie. Okay, now if it is the truth, then it's not necessarily so much force because you're acting on a real knowledge, a real understanding. But if I just want you to leave the building and I don't really have any good reason for it, like if you wouldn't leave the building if you knew that there really wasn't a fire, but I said there's a fire, then you wouldn't really leave the building, then I'm using force by getting you to believe something that isn't true. The freedom of speech is all about honesty. There have been many cultures that have made it unlawful for you to utter anything that you knew to be not true. Now, they'd have to prove that you knew it wasn't true in order to get you in trouble. But if it could be shown that you were deliberately lying, deliberately misrepresenting, it was considered unlawful. And why? Because it was hostile. It's forceful. So let's just assume that we're talking about the truth. Americans are smart. They're moral. That's the assumption. And so, therefore, when they hear the truth, they're going to recognize it. They don't need to be told what to think. And I would say this is universally true. People understand racism. All people. And if you found an exception here or there, it'd probably be less than 1% of the population. It'd be like super duper small amount of people. So people are bright enough at least to get basic things like right and wrong. If you punch someone, it's bad. Okay, even if you said something mean to you. That's microaggressions, by the way. So you have to begin with that assumption. Otherwise, freedom of speech just involves nothing more than propaganda. I tell you what you think, and then you do as I say. Very forceful, very controlling. So once you get that people can understand ideas for themselves and they don't have to be told what to do, then you can just simply show them the truth, what really is. And it may seem a little bit more complex and maybe nuanced than you might think they could get. But if you reduce it down enough to the most basic truths, not the most basic arguments and the most basic propaganda, but the most basic truth, then people can get it. So the truth is exactly what people intend to communicate. So if I say that I believe X, I really don't need you going and telling everyone else, well, he believes this interpretation of X. Just tell them, hey, he believes X, and let them figure it out for themselves. If it's not clear, maybe I'm hiding something, maybe you can show what's being hidden behind a euphemism or propaganda. But interpreting deliberately changes what I say into what we call straw men, or arguments that don't exist, but are constructed in order to, I guess, present like if I have an argument that I say, I believe X, and then you reduce it down into other arguments, like, well, that means Y, Z, then you're not really saying what I believe, you're saying a straw man of what I believe. Kind of a changing of the argument, a changing of the way I want to present it. Now, some people may want to change it because they think that maybe I'm using some euphemisms to hide meanings, or I'm trying to put a spin on it. Well, if there's a spin, you can explain the spin after, but let people hear what I actually believe, even if it sounds compelling, even if it sounds really compelling. So, yeah, let the world see things as they are. So, if I say something, retweet it. If you like it, if you hate it, it doesn't matter. Because if you hate it, when people see it, then everyone else is going to hate it too. Because they'll see what I'm saying. And if you like it, everyone else will see what you like about it. So retweet it. And if you don't see what other people like about it, think harder. Open your mind. If you hear something you don't like, try to interpret it in the best possible way. Give it the benefit of the doubt. Don't try to put it into the framework of the way you think and assume that your values are the best. Maybe consider that there might be other values that are best. And then try to see the best in what others have to say. All right, I'm going to end by looking at some of Donald Trump's tweets because a lot of people have believed that these tweets are especially bad. So we're going to look at how bad they really are. Congratulations to the new Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary, Robert Wilkie. All right, so I guess they got that through. Seems pretty nice enough to me. Congrats. Thank you to Ron Paul for yes on your future, on a future great Justice of the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh. Your vote means a lot to me. Okay, thank you. That's a good tweet. He just says thanks. This one's actually a continuation of the previous. Legal immigration is top national security problem. After decades of playing games, whole world is laughing at the stupidity of our immigration laws. All right, the Democrats thinking open borders, large-scale crime, and abolishing ICE is good for them. We must get smart and finally do what must be done for the safety and security of our country. Okay, this seems like a very clear view. He's definitely not hiding anything. There's no deception here. He's just saying it as he feels. So, he says it's a top national security problem. That's his view. I like that he's going to tell me what his view is. Now I understand where his priorities are. He thinks we've been playing games, the world's laughing at us. Good. It's good to know that he thinks the world's laughing at us. That person's perspective, how he reacts to the world, and how he's going to represent his views to the world. Democrats thinking open borders, large-scale crime, abolishing ICE is good for them. Well, the Democrats have actually said they wanted to abolish ICE. Have they said they wanted open borders? They definitely said they don't want a wall. And many of them have said that they want open borders, at least easier coming into America, which is opening the borders, maybe not completely open. So there's a good sense of truth in that. But now the truth, the absolute truth, is that he feels this way. He feels the Democrats are thinking open borders. Okay? Whether or not they actually do is an entirely different question. But the truth is, this is what he sees, is what he feels. And I think the truth is that to a large extent, he's got it down. They are for open borders to a large degree, maybe not completely or entirely, but it's a good summation of what they believe. If you were to say open or closed, they definitely lean pretty strongly to the open side of the open border scale. All right, large scale crime. Okay, so obviously he thinks that they are promoting crime by allowing people to come into our borders that shouldn't come into our borders. Bad guys to come in. Okay, so is it the largest scale crime? Maybe, maybe not, but it is definitely increasing crime. Definitely. So there's some truth to the fact that they are behind a policy or yeah, they're definitely pushing something that is increasing crime to a large degree. So don't take things as these are definitive, declarative, absolute black and white statements of truth as much as statements of truth about how he feels about things and the general sense of what he's seeing when he looks at these things. Okay? Now, why is it important to understand what he sees? If you understand what he sees, you start to understand how he thinks. If you understand how he thinks, then you're not so worried about his predictability. So I'm getting a pretty good idea of how Donald Trump thinks because of all these things that he says that he sees. And by seeing how he thinks, now he's not so unpredictable to me. I have a pretty good idea how he's going to react if anything happens, whether the media reports something or whether Democrats say they're going to be for or against something. I have a pretty good idea about Donald Trump and what he's going to do. Knowing how your leaders are going to behave, definitely a good thing. It's practically a promise. It's a promise that you can take to the bank. And so many promises our politicians make that they break, though Donald Trump has made explicit promises that he has not broken. I can't think of well, the only promise I can think he made was lock her up for Hillary, that he's maybe broken, but maybe not yet fulfilled. I'm not sure if he's ever going to do that, but he's definitely said he doesn't want to, and some good reasons for that, given how many people are willing to protect her violently. So, all right, anyhow, moving on. Definitely a good idea to hear how people feel because then you know how they're going to think about things. And in addition to knowing how they're going to behave and react, it's also helpful simply to know, hey, if somebody else has a different perspective, maybe I can consider it. What if maybe that way of thinking is right? What if he's got some good insights? Okay? Keep your mind open. Try to see the best in what others are saying. All right. So, congratulations to Judge Janine. There's another congrats on a best-selling book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. So, he saw a book, he liked it. Congrats. Okay. End of story. There's nothing to it. There's nothing hateful or racist or bigoted or morally depraved or anything like that. Now, when we do get some of those things, I really do think you should question whether or not your judgment on that is good, because there are good ways to interpret things that he says that maybe he worded poorly. It does happen. Let's see, in this one, someone's running a race spectacularly. It's practically congratulations. Again, nothing harmful about that. In fact, this one actually talks about an African American leader. So he's recognizing that he loves minorities. Okay. Now it's kind of a sad day and age where someone actually has to say, "I like blacks. I like Hispanics." I mean, that just should be a given. From my perspective, everybody is open to equality and loves everyone else, despite race or gender. All those are myths that people don't have any kind of preferences one way or the other. So the fact that you actually have to say that, I think, speaks volumes about what some people would do to smear you by saying you don't like blacks or you don't like Hispanics or women. Yeah, it's awful lies that apparently I don't know. It's perplexing to even think about that people can. And anyhow, there are reasons that people will cite for it, and it might be nice at another time to look at some of those reasons and take it apart and show why it's not true. But all right, supporting another guy. Congrats on another guy, John Kelly. So lots of congrats, welcoming. So, all the people that would say, let's take away Trump's Twitter account, really all they want to do is silence him. They don't really, they'll say that all his tweets are bad, but none of these are even questionable. None of these are even, they're all congratulatory. They're not even questionable. I mean to say, not even controversial. All right, must have border security, and he has good reasons for it. Listen to his reasons. He gives those reasons. Maybe not necessarily here, but he does give those reasons. I mean, he kind of does, right? He talks about up above. He talks about crime and other things like that. So he has his reasons. He does mention them, just not necessarily here. But some of them, I almost for common sense. Merit-based immigration just makes sense. You want people that are going to contribute strongly to our society. What's the merit? Is the merit just because you're a certain race, or is the merit because it's something you can actually do for us that can make our lives better? Okay. Always stand with ICE. That's awesome. Lots of support. Okay, so let's look at this one for a second, and then I think we're going to end here. So he says, let's see, is Robert Mueller ever going to release his conflicts of interest? So he's just pointing out he thinks that Mueller has conflicts of interest. Is it a firm fact? Maybe, maybe not. But he thinks there's conflicts of interest, and that's interesting. I'm interested to see what he thinks are the conflicts of interest. The fact that we had a very nasty, contentious business relationship, well, that might be a conflict of interest right there. What else? I turned him down to head the FBI. Okay, that might be a conflict of interest. So some good points, right? And Comey's his close friend. Okay, so there's 3 pretty good reasons. So not only do we know that he has this opinion that there's conflicts of interest, he actually cites 3 of them, and there's probably more. Again, if you see 37,000 people liking something, you might want to consider the merits of what's been said. He says also, why is Mueller only appointing angry Democrats, some of whom worked for crooked Hillary, others, including himself, who worked for Obama? Why isn't Mueller looking at all the criminal activity and Russian collusion on the Democrats' side, Podesta dossier? Okay, good questions. He's going to ask the questions. I think they're worthy of considering. Those are good questions. Now, also, you do see some bias. He talks about crooked Hillary. He's got good reasons to believe that. You may not understand the reasons or know the reasons, but at least you know that he thinks there's good reason to think that she's crooked. So keep your mind open to it. Maybe there's something you haven't heard. Okay. So definitely some good questions, and it's interesting whether or not people have actually asked those questions and what their answers are, and if there are good answers. Certainly, it's clear that he has not heard any good answers. Otherwise, he wouldn't be asking those questions. Okay, so at least if there's some kind of a secret answer that even the President of the United States can't hear, then it's worthwhile getting it out, right? Maybe you know something he doesn't. Okay, so I think that's all I'm going to look at for the tweets because there are a lot of them. But going back to the freedom of speech, I ask you, trust that if you have a population that is smart enough to know right from wrong, good from evil, racism from non-racism, don't try to push an agenda. Just let them see exactly word for word what people are saying. Don't try to tell them what to think. You don't necessarily even have to tell them what you think about it, unless you think it's your job to indoctrinate them or propagandize them. Just let them see their perspective. Maybe you have a different enlightening perspective. Hopefully you've got some evidence for your perspective. So if you're going to say, hey, they're not angry Democrats, well, then come up with some proof. Is there nothing that these Democrats might be angry about that were appointed by Mueller? Are they perfectly happy with everything that Trump has done? Is everything that they're saying in their investigation completely positive? And man, this is the greatest man since Abe Lincoln, I would say, right? Is that what they're saying? Or is there something that they don't like? And if there's something they don't like, could be anger. Could be a small amount of anger. Could be a large amount, right? But try not to, try not to find too much fault with the words used in here, because odds are, if you look for a way to interpret it where it could be true, it might open your mind and say, you know what? All these Democrats do seem to have something against Trump. They do seem to either have something in bias or they seem to have something in evidence, right? And in that case, you want to see the bias or the evidence, both, right? So, yeah, open your mind to the idea that all these words could have merit and that his perspective could be right. 39,000 other people that like the tweet could have merit in the way they're thinking. And what could that merit be? Not just how could they justify it, but how in your mind could it be good in a way that doesn't make you an evil person? How could you be a good person and see that perspective at the same time? Okay, because otherwise you're just going for, well, if I was a super evil person, then yeah, I could support evil. I totally get how evil people can support this. No, that's not looking for good intent and really trying to give an honest, it's not trying to give how do we say it, a good chance, a good shot at an argument, right? Trying to give it a fair case. So anyhow, and then the other part, if you really do think that the population is depraved, evil, even 50% of the population, right? How many people supported Trump? Depraved and evil and totally awful. I mean, like, yeah, how do you say it? Like, just the evil of the evil devils incarnate. Then, to be honest, there's absolutely nothing you could do to save the country at all. I mean, if you had that, then half the population would be going out and killing people every night, right? I mean, the whole country would devolve into anarchy within the first hour. They'd probably be mostly dead within a day or two, right? If everybody's that evil. So, yeah, just consider, since we are doing so well successfully, there may be some violence. It's a very, very small amount. Most of us are being productive, living good lives. Do take heart that there are a lot of good people and that you should consider their perspectives, consider the merit of what's being said. Okay, so that's all I have for the freedom of speech. Listen with good intent. Just give a good shot at whatever arguments are presented to you. Consider that your values may be wrong. Should a woman have the right to kill a baby? Maybe that value is wrong. Maybe there's a competing value that you should consider, like, the life of the baby. And when you realize that there are competing values and that maybe you're wrong in some things, you may become enlightened. Your value system may improve. You may find more peace and meaning with the world. And that's my hope for you. And in that way, I think the freedom of speech really can mean something. If it's just about propaganda and controlling what other people think and silencing people you don't like, then freedom of speech is just tyranny. So yeah, I really don't know. I really worry for people who have a hard time hearing others and hearing the best intent. And and allowing themselves to be persuaded, allowing themselves to see that they could be wrong. The wisest among us will listen more than we talk. So let the freedom of speech really turn into the freedom to hear. That's the biggest freedom. I'd say 100 times more powerful than this freedom of speech is just the freedom to hear everyone, and not let some voices drown out other voices. Okay, so thanks for watching. If you have any comments about, because I know this is a really complicated subject, I know there are a lot of very strong feelings about all these political issues, but yeah, feel free to leave some comments, share this, like it, whole 9 yards. Thanks. Talk to you later.